Welcome to the SCORE Business Showcase. I'm your host, Steve Geyer, and my co-host is the lovely Marianne Coche. And of course, we have with us today as a special guest, Ed Winslow, who's been in business now for the past 30 years. But before we get into Ed's business, let's do a little commercial on SCORE. Would you take over there, Marianne?
Of course, I'd love to talk about SCORE. SCORE is a free business resource. Don't go it alone. SCORE provides mentoring, online training, and webinars. There's also templates, guides, and many frequently asked questions that business owners have. So, regardless of your stage of business, there's something there for every small business owner or entrepreneur at SCORE.
Thank you. Now, Ed, I'm going to let you tell us about the industry that you're in. What made you decide to actually get into that field?
Well, it wasn't a decision that I made to get into internet marketing. I would say that internet marketing pulled me in, and I started out with, I started out many years ago with Coldwell Banker Commercial Real Estate, and I learned a business development formula, and I implemented that formula. It was a sales formula for 17 or 18 years in Manhattan, and then I got involved in investing in real estate. And then when I started to create websites and started to learn about how to promote websites for the properties I was involved in, going back to like 2001 or thereabouts. And I was very intrigued with the internet, and I thought maybe it might be the future. And so I sort of stuck with it. And then when the real estate market started to get oversaturated in like 2007, 2008, and there was, then the market tanked, and I was like, well, what am I going to do? There's nothing going on. The market was a mess, and so I just continued to work on the internet marketing things that I was involved with, primarily with a website where I was drop shipping products, and I started to make sales online, and people started to say, "Well, could you do that for me? Could you help me? Because I need to generate sales." And that's how it started to happen. And I didn't know what I was. People would say, "Well, what do you do?" And I would explain to them. And somebody one day said, "Oh, it sounds like you're an advertising agency." And I'm like, "Oh, maybe that's what I am." And so I started to say, "Oh, maybe I've got a marketing agency." And so that's how it evolved. It sort of pulled me in, and at a time when there was nothing going on in the real estate business, but I started to get the different companies, people in real estate that I knew who wanted the help, and just one thing led to another, and I just kept running with it, and it turned into a business.
So, Ed, tell me a little bit more about what NicheQuest actually does.
Yeah, well, NicheQuest really starts out with business strategies. And it doesn't matter whether you're a small business, a one person, getting started, or you're a big company. It's basically the same formula. And so what we do is, when I start working with a client, I will start to ask them a series of questions about their business and who their customers they are, because it's really all about the customer first. Like, who's your customer? What are they looking for? And we start to break down a business. Like, I'll give you an example of an insurance agency I worked with. And I said, well, tell me about, what do you do? Well, we provide home insurance, uh, home, auto, and business insurance. I'm like, well, okay, let's start breaking those down. What do you tell me about the cars, like the car insurance? Well, we provide car insurance. Well, what kind of cars? Well, all kinds of cars. Well, tell me more. And we started to get deeper into it, and we started to break it down into, and we started to create these blogs around Tesla insurance guide, Ferrari insurance guide, vintage car insurance guide, SUV insurance guide. And we started to create all these blogs all about all the different types of niches within the car industry. And we started to find some very interesting angles. Then in the home insurance, we found, antique home insurance, and, flood insurance and basement insurance and, all these niche things that people would care about because it's all about people care about themselves, right? That when they go online and they do a search, they're not searching like they did years ago in the yellow pages where, okay, I need an insurance company. No, people can search about, you can find exactly what you're looking for online today. And so the idea is to break it down. And the more you break it down, what's interesting about when you break it down is that it's easier to rank for certain things that have like antique home insurance is not a very competitive keyword phrase. If you add a town name to it, it becomes even less competitive. So it becomes a very effective, inexpensive strategy. So you can save a lot of money on paid traffic by breaking your business down by niche. And what the other thing that's really interesting about that concept, because I've done this over and over and over for many businesses, is people go to a website and they see all these niche topics rather than the general. And somehow or other, I can't really explain how it works, but I can tell you is it connects at a much different level. And in what it does is it almost tells a story about a business and it becomes memorable. When you see a business that is like I did this in New York City for a one person who is a commercial office leasing broker, and we went after a keyword phrase, office leasing cost at the World Trade Center. This is a one-person shop. He ranks number one for office space cost at the World Trade Center, office space cost at the Empire State Building. He's outranking the owners of the buildings. These are billion-dollar plus business properties, and one guy is outranking all of them because we implemented a strategy break. And I said, I don't think that you're going to get business if you go after office space for rent in New York City. It's too competitive. It's too general. Let's create a strategy for you, building by building by building. And that worked. And when people go on his site and they see not just, like you could do a search, people want to know cost, right? That's what they want to know. They want to know how much does it cost to rent space at the World Trade Center. They land on the site and they see all this great information. Well, that connects. But when they look at the site and say, oh, you've got the Empire State Building, you've got One Penn Plaza, and you've got 40 Wall Street, on and on, it's like, oh, you're the expert. Like, all these buildings. And that has connected. And that's what's so fascinating about the whole NicheQuest concept. That's how this whole thing works.
It sounds like you really understand that these business owners have to know their clients. And, I think that's amazing. I can hear your energy in what you do.
Yeah, it's exciting. I have to tell you, I can tell you so many amazing stories. Like I have so many stories, and what the thing that's interesting about this the way the internet works, and people, I think the biggest issue is that people don't really understand how the internet works. A lot of marketers don't understand, but I've had so many interesting experiences. Like I was doing some work for a commercial painting contractor out in Washington State. And so, I went through his business. Okay, tell me all the things that you do. And we started breaking it down niche by niche. Well, we created a page on about commercial painting contractors. We created another page about roof coatings because he rolled on these roof coatings on commercial buildings. And I created a link from the roofing page to the painting page, and Google saw the relevance of the two and ranked him for a keyword phrase, roof painters. My client never heard of a roof painter, but somebody searched for a roof painter this was in Washington State, and searched for a roof painter. And what the person searched for, who was searching, was a partner in 100 franchises. And they needed somebody to paint those metal decorative roofs. Because they, like ever seen like an Arby's or a McDonald's, or they have those decorative like metal roofs, and they fade out over time from the sun and the rain and everything. And so they have to paint them to maintain that brand image. So this was an investment group. They had 100 of these properties, and they started out with five. And they did a search for metal roof painter. They needed somebody to paint the metal roofs for five of these buildings for starters.
Mhm.
And this guy got that business and he subbed it out. And it worked out. He made a lot of money. It was his cost was 30,000. He subbed it out for 60. He made $30,000 just because he had the lead.
Mhm.
So they came back to him and then said, "Well, that was really great. We've got 100 of these, and we're an investment group. We don't have a property management group to take care of this. Could you handle? We have to paint these every 3 to 5 years, depending on the location." So he started to do more and more of these, and then he got a call from somebody who said, "I happen to be a partner in that hundred in the hundred. I'm a partner in another group. We own 400." All through the West Coast down to Texas, up through California. And that was one lead. That was one lead that was a life changing lead that came from the relevance between two different blog posts that generated that kind of result. So one of the things that's really amazing about this is when you implement this strategy the right way, you can find new income streams. You can find things that you didn't even know you could tap into. It's really interesting. It doesn't always happen, but it 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 always generates interesting business, but you never know how it's going to work out. That's one of the beauties of the internet.
So Ed, what led you down this internet journey?
Well, it started. Well, I got exposed to my neighbor in Wilton. I live in Wilton, Connecticut, and my neighbor, um, he and I used to go out and jog on Saturday afternoons. We both had little kids. He had started this web business back in like 1990, and we I did, he was just lived in a regular house, no big deal. He was not a very flamboyant individual. And I didn't really know what he did. And one day I was reading the New York Times, and it had the top, this was like in 1999, I guess, or 98 or something like that. And I read this article about the top technology superstars, and his name was in that list. And he was worth, according to the New York Times, 150 million. He started with nothing, and he just got into this. And so I went out for a jog one day, and I said, "Hey, I just read about you in the New York Times. It says you're worth 150 million. I never knew what you did." And so he said, "Yeah." And I said, "How'd that happen?" He told me how it happened. He said, "I never thought something like this was going to happen." And since he's moved, and his life is a lot more glamorous than it was back then. But when I saw that and I saw how it happened, I said, "This is interesting. I need to find a way into this business." And that's when I started, when I was in the real estate business, I started to create websites for the properties that I was involved in. And then I started to figure, well, how do I start to get the rankings, to promote these properties? And that's how it started. And it just sort of took on a life of its own.
Ed, how would you say your personal passions align with your business?
Well, I'm I'm pretty passionate about this business, and I wouldn't say it's not like I got into this for the money. I I just got excited about it. I don't know what it is. I just got really, it's just I just got really excited about this business, and I always loved the formula that I learned when I was at Coldwell Banker years ago. Like that formula, like if you stick with the formula, it works. And it was really interesting because that formula was all about, it was basically what they taught. It didn't matter what business, what niche you went into, whether you're going to sell big apartment buildings, small apartment buildings, you're going to lease industrial space, office space, whatever it is. The whole concept behind Coldwell Banker at the time, which became CBRE, is really find a market of 350 owners of property and get 8 of them on the phone every day and send them something in the mail every month and become the expert in that niche. And that's what Coldwell Banker did. That's how they became such this massive real estate company with this. It's almost like a little franchise business that they're teaching you. They teach you how to cultivate like these little niche markets all over the place. And I had the unique vantage point of being able to see on a national basis how this worked. If you wanted to sell, 350 unit apartment buildings, and you wanted to target 350, or let's say if you want to sell big apartment buildings, you would find a market of 350 owners, and you would just cultivate that market. Now that would be geographically, like let's say you're in Connecticut, you might cover the entire state. Whereas if you wanted to sell 2 unit to 10 unit, you might be just down in Fairfield County or maybe parts of Fairfield County. So geographically, your market for that niche is smaller. You might do more volume than the big one, and so that's how the formula works. Like I had heard of people in New York City just, focusing on 1 or 2 buildings. That's all they did was they knew they knew every tenant, they knew every space. And that's all they did is they focused on that niche. And that I was always fascinated with that because all the clients that I dealt with and all the businesses that we sold buildings for, or they all somehow or other had this very unique focus. They had everyone that was successful had something that they did. Like, what do you do? And it was like, oh, I remember we sold a property to the Beretta gun company in New York City, and they had been in business since the 1500s. But what do? They sell the Beretta handguns, right? Everybody knows Beretta, and they sell hunting guns, things like that. They're very specialized, and they're very specialized in more of a high end, but that's an example. And there's so many businesses like that. So I don't know if I'm deviating, but this is how I ended up in the internet space.
Now, actually, how did you get started? What were those things that got off the ground?
In the internet part of it?
Yeah.
Well, what happened was when I really started to get into it, it was in that transitionary period when the real estate market, back in like 2005, 6, my goal was to leave the brokerage and build I wanted to get into the investment real estate business. I wanted to have my own firm, buying properties, managing properties, that kind of thing. That was my ultimate goal. And so I did that. I had a really, really great year in the brokerage in New York that I never thought I would be able to replicate it. I think I sold 1 year in that little territory I was in. I sold 12 buildings 1 year, and only one of them was through an outside broker. So all the commissions, like I got 100% of the commissions, and I'm like, that's never going to happen again. This is my shot. I did really, really well that year. I had the opportunity. I was like, you know what? When I finally sold I was marketing all these buildings. Once I sold the last one, I was like, I'm out of inventory. I have nothing. It's going to take me a year and a half to build up inventory and start selling these properties again. Why don't I take what I've got? I raised some money with some partners, and I bought an apartment building in Stamford, Connecticut. And that's how it started. And one thing, I started buying a couple properties, and then the market just got so hot back then. And I was bidding on properties, and I was getting I wasn't even in the ballpark. And so I'm like, this is not working. The market's too hot. I don't like what I see going on. This is crazy. And so right around that time, I was like, I came up with this idea. I created this little website, and I thought maybe I'll do this on the side. I created a little drop shipping type of business, and that started to work. And, and that's when the internet really started to pull me in, because that was working. People are saying, well, how are you doing that? Could you do that for me? Could you do that for my business? And so I was like, well, I don't know, I could try. And so I started to implement the strategy for businesses. And in the beginning, I wasn't really good at what's called search engine optimization. I didn't know really how to get the results on a national basis for big keyword phrases. So I said, well, what if I take this keyword and I match it with a town name? Because then the competition is less. And that started to work. And that's how it started to, and I started to see, oh my gosh, people are searching locally. And it aligned exactly with my Coldwell Banker formula that I learned. And so I started to apply that strategy um, to different businesses. And as I was generating business for them and they were making a lot of profit off what I was doing for them, they started to refer other businesses. And over the years, I've been involved. I mean, I worked with a client in New York City that was in the custom aquarium business. They built these amazing aquariums, and I implemented this strategy for them. And that was interesting because we even got them ranking on Google for custom aquariums, like over in Paris and London. Certainly New York City, they were just generating so much business in New York. And we were implementing a strategy in different cities all around the country, and it worked really well. Um, you know, I think they referred me big real estate broker out in California, out in the Beverly Hills area. So I started to work with them. Insurance. I've got a couple different insurance type clients. I've got the radiology client. That was a referral from somebody else, and it just built. It just built. That's how it built. It just built. On word of mouth, and just one thing led to another, and it was sort of interesting because I just applied the strategy. Like I didn't know, like I just went and I applied the strategy the same way that we did when I was at Coldwell Banker. It's like, okay, who's your market? Where are they? What's the value of your whatever it is you sell? And let's figure out it's like, what do they want? Like when somebody's doing a search, what do they want?
Amazing, Ed. How you have all these great stories, and I can hear your passion and how excited you are to help your clients out. What I'm curious is, as a business owner, what kind of challenges did you face that you had to overcome?
I think, I think the, I think the lack of understanding that businesses have about the internet. I don't think a lot of businesses understand what the potential is. I think a lot of businesses have worked. I hate to say this. I don't mean to bash the industry, but there's a lot of people that are in this business now who really don't know what they're doing. They say they do, and like you can even go like you can you can look at sites like GoDaddy, and even Vistaprint. I think offers search engine optimization services for $49 a month, and a lot of clients say, well, why would I pay you? So what I do is when I analyze what their strategy is and how competitive is online, I might come up with a price. There was a client yesterday that somebody referred to me. It was a big accounting company, and they had they have a big plan. And I said to the person who referred the business, I said, you're looking at a very competitive strategy. You're going to start out at $10,000 a month. And, that was their strategy. Now, somebody else might be a lot less, but a lot of businesses look at it and say, well, why would I pay you, $10,000? Why, let's say this client didn't really understand, right? And which is the case a lot of times. This is sort of an extreme example, but a client might say, business owners might say, well, why would I pay you $10,000 when I can get it over here at GoDaddy for $50? I'm like, well, go ahead. That right there is the biggest challenge. I would say that's the number one biggest challenge, is that they don't understand, because there's so many people in the industry today, a lot of overseas businesses I get these emails all day. I get phone calls all day from, we can get you first page on Google, and that doesn't mean anything. and it's very cheap. And so many consumers have tried and they've gotten no results. So they don't know the difference a lot of times between me and somebody else. And I think that's the hardest thing that we have, that, as people who are good at this kind of marketing,
Mhm.
I think that's the biggest challenge is why would I hire you over this person?
Right. That educational component is
Yeah.
really, um,
Yeah. That's the hard part. That's the hard part. And, so as a result, a lot of my business is word of mouth. People get an actual result, they tell somebody else. And then when they contact me, it's like I'm already pre-sold. So I mean, today what I'm doing is, as I mentioned earlier, before we started today, is I'm building an educational platform where people can come and learn how to do a lot of these things themselves. Um, it's really, it's not like I'm any kind of genius or anything. I'm not that. I just like I knew how to write content because when I was in the real estate business, that's what we did. We would create marketing packages and these marketing books. And to me, when we created these marketing books or these presentation packages, we're creating content and we're using that as a sales tool. To me, those are like offline versions of websites. So, like, I knew how to work with bullet points and certain words and phrases that would catch my prospects' attention because I'm trying to sell something. How do I convert them, even one on one? So, we had, so I just applied all the old things that I knew offline, online, and that's how it worked. But going back to the biggest challenges, I would say the biggest challenge um, is working with, or speaking with businesses and, for them to understand how the process really works. That's really why I'm building this educational platform.
It sounds really exciting. But Ed, how can our viewers get in touch with you?
Well, I have I have a Facebook group that I'm building called Local Marketing Strategies, and that's a free group. Um, and I've been working on building that for the last 4 or 5 months. I have about 500 members there. It's a free group. That's a great group to come join on Facebook, because I'm posting new things every day, little tips, little educational things, and you can network with other people in the group, and it's all about local marketing strategies. That's what it's all about. So that's a start. NicheQuest.com is another one, and I would say those two are probably the best way to get a hold of me.
I tell you, this journey that you took us on today has been really enjoyable. How it started with Caldwell Banker and then it blew up from there as far as the internet is concerned. It sounds like this is a fantastic business model that you've put together for yourself, and we really appreciate you coming on the show.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. It's fun
And
to talk. It's fun to talk about.
yes, yes, yeah, we can see that.
yes.
We enjoyed that, but we'd like to thank you once again. I'd like to thank my co-host, and also I'd like to thank our viewers out there for watching. Once again, to your business success, and thanks for watching the SCORE Business Showcase.
All right. Thank you.